Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Grin webinar. We're going to give it another minute before we get started. We've got some people that are just joining and jumping on.
You can submit all of your pressing questions in the chat box, or you can chime in and turn your video on and chat with everybody. Before, actually, you might not be able to. I don't know if everybody's muted or not, but you should have access to the chat box. Please, get some info going. We're going to be keeping it real today, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Okay.
And
All right.
And this is not a pre-recorded webinar. In a lot of ways, I prefer the pre-recorded webinars because then I know it's like I've said what I want to say and we got through everything. So, and I'm not breaking up or kind of, so hopefully my internet's good. Hopefully we get to go through a lot of things together. But you never know what you're going to get. So we'll do our best.
We love live webinars. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are going to kick it over to Dr. Manuele in a second, and he's going to take you through his webinar, Expert Care Beyond the Chair. I am Jillian Kabansky. I'm the head of marketing and education here at Grin. I'm going to be co-hosting this afternoon with Dr. Manuele. And we can go ahead and let's get started. But thank you all so much for joining us on your Thursday afternoons.
Awesome. Thanks, Jillian. Appreciate you. So like she mentioned, we're going to be talking obviously about Grin. That's what you signed up for. These are the house rules. I didn't create them, nor will I enforce them. But obviously, I've embarrassed myself a couple times having my screen on mute or unmute and not realizing it. So maybe double check that. But I think Jillian has that taken care of, and there will be a recording afterwards in case you miss anything. But I don't know, we might edit a bunch out afterwards, so we'll see. But I'm Jeremy Manuele. I'm an orthodontist from Las Vegas, Nevada. This is my family here, standing invitation. If any of you guys are out here and want to get together for a meal or to swing by the practice and say hello, would more than welcome that. So as you will soon find out, if you don't already know, I'm a pretty open book. So I don't leave a lot on the table. And I may not be right all the time. I may not be wrong all the time, but I am going to give you how I see things, at least in that moment in time as I see them. And today, I am primarily going to be talking to you about my journey with Grin. And not even with Grin specifically, but my journey with remote monitoring in general. And for me, like this was a very different journey than I would say is my typical journey. So I am the type of person who usually has an idea and then I just do it and then I figure it out afterwards. And for me, remote monitoring was not, I couldn't do it that way. Like I had to take time and analyze and think about it and really figure out what was going to work best in my practice. And honestly, I was really, really scared that I was going to make the wrong choice. And so I just I probably researched remote monitoring for almost a year before I actually pulled the trigger and ended up signing up with Grin. And throughout this time, I was talking with everybody I could. I was talking to the Grin people. I was talking to the DM people. I was talking to people who used to be Grin and switched to DM. I was talking to people who used to be DM and switched to Grin. I was going to people who were using it a lot, who were using it a little. And I would just pick up information as I went. And so today we're going to go through kind of that entire journey and my thought processes. And some of it may resonate with your journey, some of it may not, but you're going to get it how it was. So at the end of the day, there's a few reasons why I chose Grin and a few reasons why I chose remote monitoring in general. So I'm going to start by explaining the remote monitoring side of it. So for me, deciding, the first decision you have to make is, do you want to remote monitor at all? And one of the biggest things, I had specific goals that I was looking to achieve with remote monitoring, and we'll go through those later. But one of the things that kept me going with this decision of, hey, I do need to keep pursuing this remote monitoring option is everybody I talked to. And this is regardless on what platform they were using. Everybody I talked to who was remote monitoring, none of them stopped. They might have switched from one company to the other. They might have, done X, Y, or Z. They might have changed what plan they're on. They might have changed the way they do it. But none of them just stopped and said, this is not for me. Like I'm getting rid of this out of my practice. And most of them continued to share like how impactful and powerful it was and the changes that it occurred in their practice, which were more than they even realized before they started monitoring. And so for me, like pretty early in that process of evaluation, I was pretty convinced that I was going to start monitoring and that I probably wasn't going to stop because I saw that as the way that things were going. And so why I chose Grin specifically and what we'll be focusing on here the most is these top two right here, the enhanced patient relationship and the peace of mind. This is at a time when I was reading articles that were being published about remote monitoring and, to the effect of they're basically saying like, hey, all this remote monitoring is great, but, look at this study and survey, like patients, patients don't think it's as great as you do. And, they're resistant. They want to see the doctor, like all these kind of things. And that was scary for me. That reinforced some of these preconceived notions that I had. And it gave me pause. And that was one of the big reasons why it did take me longer to finally move forward with this. But I started to understand more how the patients perceive this since I've been using it. But even before I started, I realized that there is something to this that's important that I wasn't giving enough credence before. So I want to start out by asking you all a question. And my question is, how long are your arch wire appointments and how long are your aligner check appointments? And so, feel free to throw them in the chat if you want. But I really, and some of your practices, are probably a lot more efficient than mine in many ways. I mean, I'm by no means an expert in orthodontics, nor am I an expert in remote monitoring. I'm just one guy trying to do my best, nor am I an expert in efficient patient scheduling and making the most out of every single visit. But probably for most of us, your arch wire appointment, depending on the type of braces you use, maybe 20 minutes-ish, 20, 30 minutes-ish, something like that. And your aligner check appointment, probably 10, 15 minutes, something like that. That's probably the answer that you would give. And that's definitely the answer that I would have given you a year ago or 2 years ago. But what if I told you these appointments are actually at a minimum an hour? Would you think I'm crazy? And this is a switch that flipped for me. I started thinking about the appointments from the perspective of the patient, not from the perspective of my office. So yes, that patient may be back in my chair sitting for 10 or 15 minutes for their aligner check. But you imagine what has to go on in order for that to happen. The parent has to leave work. They have to drive to their kid's school, 15 minutes. At a minimum, they're going to be waiting at the school 3 minutes because it's like Fort Knox to get your kid out of school these days. It's like, submit your social security number, blood test, eye vision, documentation, visa, whatever. And then you finally get your kid, which is great. So now you can drive 10 minutes to the office, and that's being generous, I think, because they probably drive further to see you because you guys are the best. And then they arrive at your office and you're running on time that day. So it's a very minimal wait, like less than 5 minutes. And then they're finally back to see you and you have your 10 or 15-minute aligner check appointment. And then it's right back in the car, back to school. And then luckily, when you drop them off, it's not near as intimidating, right? You're just like, hey, you figure it out and just go back. They'll take you back. And then by the time you get back to work, this is a process that is at a minimum an hour or more. And think of how you as a patient are going to be feeling. And I don't care what type of service you're looking for. If there were a way to accomplish the same goals and you could save yourself all of this time, I mean, who wouldn't be interested in that? And when I started to see this from the patient's perspective, it became very clear that the preconceived notions about remote monitoring in general are an orthodontist thing. Like it's because patients don't understand it. And I also think that technology can get in the way of it in some ways if it's not set up properly. And we'll go through that together. But when you think about a Grin scan, we're talking about 60 seconds of their time, probably at night or whenever it's convenient at them, wherever they do their thing, they're going to take their scan. This is why, this was my intent of why I wanted to start remote monitoring when I did a little over a year ago. So this was the schedule in 2014. This is when I joined the practice. So this was a single doctor practice at the time. There were 3 assistants. We were seeing 60 to 70 patients per day and working 12 days a month. Okay. And this is how things rolled. I would get there, before 7 to make sure I was ready for the morning meeting at 7. And I would seldom leave the office before 5:15 and sometimes almost 6. My business partner, I love him to death, Cree Hamilton. He is a bit of a talker. And at this time, I joined the practice. I was literally just mostly observing and helping out where I could. But this was just why I was being introduced to the practice. So this was basically his schedule. So fast forward, this was to 2023. So this was before I had started remote monitoring. We had made a lot of other changes prior to remote monitoring. So at the time, at the beginning, we weren't really doing many aligner cases at all. Now we're up to about, 2023, about 25% aligners. We'd switched to an entirely digital workflow with DIBS. We'd switched to 100% ULab. We'd incorporated TADs and MARPIs. And our production was roughly double what it was in 2014. At this point, we have 2 doctors, 4 assistants, and we have 50 to 60 patients per day, 12 days a month. And at the time, Dr. Hamilton had reduced to 8 days a month. So basically, there's 8 days a month where we're both there, and then there's 4 days a month where I was there. And this is what the schedule looked like. Every day we were there, we would see 50 to 60 appointments per day. And if you are familiar at all with digital workflow and you look at aligners, DIBS, ULab, you understand that all of those things require digital work behind the computer in order to do. And when you look at this schedule, you might ask yourself, well, when is this person doing the digital work? And at the time, I was doing the best to do the digital work in between patients, essentially, whenever I could get to it. And that was fine when Dr. Hamilton and I were both there 12 days a month. But when he cut down to 8 days a month, and there was that third day where I was seeing all these patients myself, basically, it became much harder to carve out the time to do that. So my goal and vision with remote monitoring is I need to create a third day that allows me to actually have time to work on these digital setups. And so this is what our current schedule looks like. So this is about 1 year post implementing Grin into my practice. But what I will tell you is that we didn't just magically figure this out. We just set the schedule this way. And we said, hey, 2 days a week are going to be busy. And you can see those here, 56, 60 patients. And some of you may laugh and say that's not busy. But for us, that's busy. But 50 to 60 patients, 2 days a week. And on that third day, we call it a start new patient day. And so basically the idea is you might see a few patients before school, and then the majority of the day is starts in new patients. Starts with digital workflow are pretty straightforward because most of it's delegated. The DIBs have indirect bonding trays, the ULabs have templates. And so there's not a lot of doctor time required, just to check afterwards to make sure everything's good. And new patients are also primarily happening between the treatment coordinator and the new patient. And so, you'll come in and do the exam. But that leaves a whole lot of time to be able to do other things throughout that workday. And that was what I wanted to achieve and accomplish. And, when I look at this and when I look at my schedule, I think, wow, like this is really, really cool that we were able to do this. What surprises me the most is how little intelligence and effort I needed to make this happen. Like literally all I had to do was make the decision and then ask my scheduling coordinator. I said, hey, we just need to do this. Like, can you figure it out? And they just revised the templates and we started, utilizing remote monitoring, and we cut out appointments that weren't necessary, and that was it. And so that was awesome. That was probably, from a personal standpoint, the best reason that I wanted to switch, and probably from a personal standpoint, because again, this is giving me my time back. This is what I took out of it, which is important, but it's not the most important thing in my opinion. So I'm going to take you back to the beginning of my journey. Some things shifted, and it made it had a really powerful effect on me. And I'm going to walk you through just a couple of those small shifts. So one of them, and we have to take a little bit of an aside here, and I apologize, but you look at this, and I'm one of the small percentage of people who think this is cool. And you're probably saying, what even is this? All right. So Dr. Hamilton, when he built his house years ago, he's like, man, I got a lot of nice things in my house, but like, if there's one thing I really love, it's the heated shower mirror. And I'm like, what's that all about? And so basically it's hardwired into your shower, and, you turn on a switch, and it has these heating coils behind it so that the shower doesn't fog up, and you can, shave and take care of, not worrying about, light or water or fog or anything like that. And so like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like maybe one day I'll have a heated shower mirror. And so, I mentioned it to my wife, and we moved to a new house at the beginning of the year this year, and we were doing some remodeling, and we were doing some remodeling in the bathroom. And so like I start this research process of figuring out like, how am I going to, what remodeling or what mirror am I going to use to put in the bathroom? And, I'm looking around and I'm like, dang, like, these are kind of pricey. And this is actually one of the less expensive ones. And then you still have to hardwire it in. And, but I'm like committed. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I'm a gadget guy. Like, I'm going to have this, for 20 years and it's not going to matter and blah, 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 blah. Well, meanwhile, my wife being a lot more practical and probably having a lot more insight, I think, my birthday or father, something came up, some event came up. And lo and behold, I get this gift given to me on some occasion. So I opened up this gift. She'd heard about me talking about, this heated shower mirror, and she's amazing. And of course, in the nicest way, she's like, oh, like this was such a thoughtful gift, and it was. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, oh man, like I kind of really want that other thing still. And she just kind of subtly asked questions along the way, like, hey, how, so how does that work? How does it turn on? It's like, oh, there's a switch. And it's like, oh, well, where's the switch? Oh, it has to be like outside the shower because, you have to turn it on, electricity, everything, blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, and so like, what happens if you like don't turn it on? It's like, oh, well, you just have to hop out and go turn it on. She just kept asking these little questions. And I had to question to myself, thinking, this is something like that no one's ever going to see. The only thing I'm going to use it for is shaving. Like what's the big deal? So long story short, in my shower today rests the $39 heated mirror, which you just put water in. It has a section behind it, and you put hot water in it, so it's immediately hot. And then when you're done, you just dump the hot water out, and that's it. And it just occurred to me like I'd put so much investment into this idea that I thought was so cool, and I'd never really sat down and thought about like it's just not what's most important. At the end of the day, like I would much rather have a gift that my wife gave me that I appreciate that works better because it heats up faster because the water's already hot than this fancy thing that I thought that I wanted. And so, when I started to dial that in and think about like, what is the most important? When I was researching, I was stuck on this AI concept. Like I thought it was so cool. And in all fairness, I still think it's cool. Like I love AI. I use it for tons of different things. And so when I was hearing about the capabilities of this AI and how, the tracking, the monitoring and the hygiene and like all these different things, like I was blown away, very, very impressed. And so again, that's why I spent most of my time researching that. And I visited more DM offices than I did Grin offices, to be honest with you. And it wasn't until I visited a big DM practice, and ironically, that the flip or the switch flipped in my mind. And I went to this practice, and this doc was amazing. I mean, he had basically gone from, braces and aligners to almost primarily 100% aligners. He was able to double his revenue, reduce the amount of team members he needed. So he was doing like everything right. And so I wanted to see like how that was done. I'm like, let me go visit this practice and figure this out before I actually try to implement this in my practice. Like, let me see actually how this works. And when I went there, yes, it was a very well-run operation and it was good. And so I started asking him all the questions. I'm like, hey, so tell me more about this AI stuff and like, what's going on with that and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like, I don't know, like, like the aligner tracking stuff and like, they can detect the hygiene and like all this kind of stuff. And like the brackets, it'll tell you which bracket, it'll keep a log and you can run an Excel spreadsheet afterwards and figure out, how many brackets it was on which tooth. And he's like, yeah, we don't really use any of that. And I was just like, huh. And I just had to stop for a minute and think like, wow, this thing that I thought was so incredibly important, he was able to accomplish so many things without really using it much at all. And then I started to get behind the scenes, and I'm working with the team members. I'm saying, hey, like how does this work? Like, what do you do? And they're showing me the platform, and they're showing me basically, what's happening is you have AI that's reading the scans for you and actually communicating to the patient whether they are a go or a no-go. And I thought, well, that's cool. I mean, that's awesome, right? I mean, that takes a lot of load off of somebody, right? Somebody's got to look at the scans. So why not have the AI look at the scans? They're pretty good. But the challenges are sometimes the AI doesn't get it right. And sometimes the AI gets it too right, meaning that like, oh, well, they really could have progressed if someone would have looked and said, hey, that's really not a big deal. But they're no go, no go, no go, no go. And then you spend your time figuring out why that is, blocking out teeth, saying, hey, look, don't pay attention to that one, AI. But what really stood out to me is a conversation I had, and they were telling me about a patient who received a message at like 2:14 in the morning. And at the time, the way that I understood it, it wasn't clear that the patient knew that it was AI that was responding to them. until that moment, because they're thinking, well, nobody's up at 2:14 in the morning to respond to me. And so I'm not even going to tell you that it's bad to have AI monitor your scans if that's what you choose to do. But I do think that you need to let the patients know about that. Because if they are expecting to have a response from a real person and they're getting an AI generated response, eventually they're going to realize that. And that will become very, very clear. And in that moment is when the switch flipped. And I realized how powerful what Grin calls human intelligence, but what I call Marin and Debbie, because those are the two that I've worked with, is how big of a factor that is in maintaining the relationship with the patient throughout this new innovative process that people may be resistant to, right? Not everybody is excited for change. And so that was, for me, the most important thing. It's like, how can I maintain, and not even maintain, how can I enhance the relationships with my patients by implementing remote monitoring? And that was when the light bulb moment went off. So let me talk to you about my experience with Marin and onboarding. So her and Debbie trained my team. They trained me, and we turned it on, and we taught people how to scan. Just let them do it. We essentially were a fly on the wall for a good 6 months. And we just did what we needed to do as far as what Marin or Debbie would tell us we needed to do. So if there was a scheduling thing that came up, she would reach out to Mona in my office and she would take care of it. Or if there was something that I needed to do as a doctor, she would let me know. She would take care of it. They're very easy to work with. They're like, hey, do you want us to email you? Do you want us to message you through the app? Do you want us to text you? Like, what's your preference? And so it was so easy. Like, we just turned it on and they did it for us. It was incredible. And so this is an example. You know, Marin, to my patients, is one of my team members, and she is one of my team members. I didn't train her. She's not on my payroll, but she is one of my, I would argue, most important team members. And all of these things that come up that you used to have to address in the office, which oftentimes were worse in the office before you actually found out it was happening, she's addressing in real time. And so I want to walk you through what that looks like. So here's an example from a younger patient that we were treating with a face mask and with an expander. And I just want to read this. So this was Debbie at the time. Good evening, Benny. Yes, you can. You can text me anytime. Have any questions or concerns? So glad you figured it out. You had amazing progress. I want to looking at your scan. I hope you have a great week. Okay. Look at what time this is sent out at. And I didn't know this literally until this morning. When I was seeing these responses going in at the 7, 8 at night, 6 in the morning, I was thinking, man, Grin's got to be incentivizing that in some way. You know what I mean? Like they want to, be the company that that provides, just this higher level of service. And so, there's probably incentives if it's after hours or something for these people to respond. But that's not it at all. These are salaried employees through Grin. They work in a close-knit team. They work together, as you'll see. You can see Debbie responding there, Mary responding below. You'll have a primary person, which is your go-to. That's like the number one. But if they're ever out, then one of the other members is going to step in. And there's no bonuses. It's just like they just do what they do because they love what they do and they have experience in orthodontics and they want what's best for you and your patients. And it's incredible. So we go down. She's asking questions. Hey, Benny, gums over time can loosen your expander, so maybe stay away from that. Have a great night. Thanks for answering my question. I haven't eaten any gum, and I won't. So bye-bye. Good job. Keep up the good work, kiddo. This is something that it takes a person that understands emotional intelligence to do. I'm not saying Grin coordinators have to be the ones to do it. If it's of your purview that you want to train one of your own team members to become an expert, I think that's entirely possible. And when I first signed on with Grin, that was my intention. I was thinking, okay, well, we'll use the remote care specialist for now because that way it's easier to implement. And then once we kind of figure out how to do it, we'll just take that over and we'll have a team member do it and it'll be good to go. But I started thinking about the practical implications of asking my team members to be available the hours that the Grin coordinators are available. And I also thought about all the little things that come up that that my team may not know how to deal with because they haven't viewed hundreds of thousands of scans from multiple practices. And so like I went 180 degrees. Like in my mind, it's like that would be the last thing I would want to go is my Grin coordinator. And so, you see these relationship building, these are happening essentially 24/7, not 24/7, but let's just say, well, obviously you'll see it 6 in the morning to 8 at night sometimes. These relationships are being built with your patients and you didn't have to do anything except for get them started with Grin. And so, good evening, Benny. Thank you for the scan. Everything's progressing nicely. I keep I see some good expansion. Keep up the good work with your face mask expander. Hope you're having a wonderful week. And then, I'm chiming in. I'm just a fly on the wall at this point, and I'm just going through and reading some of these and trying to figure this out. This is September 2023, so this is when we're brand new. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'll chime in here and there. What I found now is that, there's situations where, Marin will let me know if I should chime in. Like, so if she gets the sense from the patient, like, hey, I think it would go a long way if you sent them a message or just reached out to them, she'll just text me. And I'll hop onto the patient, I'll see what's going on, what their concerns are, and just be like, hey, just like with your normal team members, right? I mean, sometimes the assistant's like, hey, can you just go get the doctor? I mean, the same thing happens with remote monitoring, right? Sometimes they're just, hey, like, can I ask the doctor a question? Absolutely. This happens so infrequently, it's not a huge deal. And the patient knows and feels that they have direct access to you because they do. If there's something that they need, they're going to be taken care of. But I think the reason it happens so infrequently is because, Marin is so good at taking care of people. So they don't need me for anything, which is amazing. But yeah, 7 at night, 8 at night. I'm doing good taking care of the expander. I was wondering if Debbie was still there. I haven't heard from her in a while. She's my friend. Could you tell me where she is? Hi, Benny, my new friend. I'm sure you miss Debbie. She's at home with her husband who's having some health problems. I talk to her every day, though, and I'll let her know you're thinking of her. Hey, thanks for sending the scan. Hi, Benny. Marin texted me. Debbie jumps in. No one asked her to do this. No one asked her to do this. Marin texted me a special message to pass along. You're so sweet. You've made my heart so happy. As Marin said, my husband's had some difficult medical issues, and I'm taking care of him and making sure he gets better as soon as possible. I just wanted to jump in and say hi and keep up the good work. Marin's amazing. You'll love her as a friend. I'm sure she'll be in touch. Dear Marin Broadhurst, sorry I couldn't get back to you sooner, but I've been really busy last night and I couldn't go to bed till 11 o'clock. My mouth was hurting. And dear Debbie, I've heard from you that haven't heard from you in a while, but I hope your husband gets feeling better. These relationships are real. And as much as there's no substitute for that, there's really no substitute for that. So whether you use Grin's remote coordinators or whether you train somebody up to be this person for your practice, if you're going to switch to remote monitoring, this, in my opinion, should be your #1 priority. Figure out how to not only maintain the relationship, but to enhance the relationship. I've been working on it super much. I sent in another scan your way. I hope it's starting to work out. Keep up the super good job, kiddo. 6:48 a.m. It's crazy. She meets patients where they are. Hey, yo, I've noticed it's really hard for me to close the gap there. I'll send a photo, use Chewy's. Marin, what up? Yeah, those teeth are super stubborn. Let me have Dr. J take a look. It takes a person to build a relationship like this. Teeth are so stubborn, just like me. Notice a change in my teeth. Have a good one. You're welcome. Hopefully the next few trays will work out. I'll send a message to Dr. J too. Have a great one. She'll loop you in. She'll loop your team in as is needed to maintain and improve the relationship. This is one of our patients who went public with her treatment. And, it's just, these conversations are happening all the time. These back and forth relations. I've had more patients come in wanting to meet Marin, and then, we have to explain to her, hey, yeah, she's remote, but yeah, I'll let her know you're thinking about her. I mean, it's just awesome. And at the end of the day, the last thing I wanted was another thing that was stressful on my plate. I wanted to be able to implement something that wasn't going to take more time, take more mental energy, take more stress away, that was going to be able to allow me to provide a better result and feel less stressed about the process. And if there's any subset of cases that happens with, it would be MARPI cases. Now, I'm just going to forewarn you guys that if you don't want the next 20 years of your practice to, to have increased stress in many ways, then you might want to tune out and ignore the possibility of MARPI at all. But I want to walk you through a case because I feel like it's important. And for me, this was something, and it may be something else in your practice. There may be some other procedure that can be stressful or that you worry about or that you wish you could see these patients more often. But these patients, I always, felt and knew in my own mind that I needed to keep a close eye on these patients. There's a lot of things that can happen during treatment. And you might look at that case and say, like, what in the world are you talking about? MARPI, these teeth are perfect. And certainly 10 years ago, I would have said the same thing. But, I would also warn you not to go down the path of learning about jaw size discrepancies and sleep disorder breathing and function with mismatched shape of jaws. Because once you see it and learn it, you can't unsee it and unlearn it. So when we measured her out, upper jaw was about the same size as the lower jaw. If you look at, what it quote unquote should be, and I know there's argument about that, but it should be about 3 to 5 millimeters wider. That's what it always was before, postmodernism, whatever. So this patient wanted to be expanded. All right, this was a patient that actually sought this out. It wasn't a treatment I was recommending when she just came in for a consult. She wanted expansion. She had her reasons, and that's, not the time or webinar for that, but there certainly would be. So this is day 1. This is week 1. I used to bring these patients in at week 1, at week 3, at week 5, because I wanted to be able to keep an eye on this expansion process. I wanted to make sure there were no complications. I wanted to make sure things were symmetrical. Week 2 progress, week 3 progress, week 4 progress. I can see everything that I need to see to know this patient is okay. So this is a patient that I'm going to be monitoring every step of the way. Every single scan they send, I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to, I don't respond unless I need to. Marion's going to look at it and respond, but I'm going to look at every single one of these scans to have my own peace of mind that this treatment is going forward the way that I want it to. So at this point, once the expansion is done, well, now the primary person who's going to be monitoring these for me is Marin. So she's going to be checking the aligners. She's going to be checking the fit. She's going to be checking for tracking. So this is 9 weeks progress. This is 4 months progress. Right? You can see the split between the upper jaw there with the MARPE there and the space closing up. And so this eliminated right there multiple appointments in my office and the headache of not knowing. Even seeing him every 2 weeks, I never know what's happening between those weeks. And it's a result that I couldn't have gotten the patient without expansion. So if this is something that you're interested in, we have our course open. So shameless plug. If you're not interested in expansion or airway, then you can tune out. If you are interested, the registration for this course closes in less than 2 weeks. This is a labor of love putting this course together. It was something that I was passionate about and I believe in. And I think that all of us as orthodontists need to know about this. That's my opinion. There were just so many things that I wish I knew before I started doing skeletal expansion that took me so many courses to get. I wanted to make this accessible to more people. And so it's an online course. It's about 7 hours long. But by the time you're done with it, even if you don't do MARPEs, you should have a pretty good understanding of why some of us do. And that's what that's all about. Okay, so let's go back to relationships here. All right, so this is a patient that was struggling. I'm just thinking I'm only going to have all my teeth pulled and do some kind of fake teeth and dentures. I can't stop grinding. It's only going to get worse. What's going on? I understand it's difficult. Tell me the process is slow. I can guarantee you're progressing nicely. Like these are things that are happening. And this was a TAD intrusion case. So there's things going on. It can be difficult orthodontics sometimes, but you have someone in your corner taking care of the emotional needs of the patient as well as whatever orthodontic needs that they may have. And when necessary, she'll bring me in. Hey, I'm saying definitely, a tooth nerd, been in ortho for almost 30 years. I did send a message to Dr. J about the grinding. So, hey, this is an opportunity to bring me into the conversation and maybe I can help in some way. And so we jump in, we talk about, hey, well, maybe we'll try an aqualizer, come into the office, we'll get you going. And you think about that as a patient. In her mind, she has 24/7 access to me as a doctor because all she has to do is message and Marin will get her in touch with whoever she needs to. And if it's me, then she's going to get her in touch with me. Like, even though these things happen so rarely, I mean, it's probably like once or twice a month that Marin reaches out to me specifically for something that a patient needs me to do. And so it's not happening very often, but in the mind of the patient, it's like, I'm there for them all the time. And I am. If they need me, I'm there. So, this is something totally unrelated to ortho. Hey, sorry, I've been super sick this weekend. Okay, I hope you get feeling better. Go ahead and advance, double heart, purple heart emoji. If I get like a single yellow heart, I'm feeling good. Marin's out there getting double purple heart emojis for me. Like it's incredible. So I'm going to go through this more quickly because I'm realizing we're already halfway through here. Time is going fast. Oral hygiene is another one of my things that I don't know if I'll ever solve, but it's something that sometimes keeps me up at night. This was a patient's very first scan. This was 3 weeks into treatment. I don't know how long your appointment intervals are initially, but ours are anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. So had this scan not been taken, I would have had no idea that this was the case until at least 5 weeks later and possibly, 9 weeks later. So obviously we want to get ahead of that. So Marin's going to jump in and she's going to create, whatever messaging is needed to let the patient know what's going on. Sorry, that is, well, I can't show you. I'll show you more later. But long story short, he improves his hygiene. Looks like you've been working on your brushing. You did a great job. This was the scan the next time. And sorry about that. Yeah, my slide isn't working. It's skipping one. So I apologize. I thought I tested them all, but it is not going because my point was, my point was that the hygiene improved at the next scan. So the very next scan, it was really, really good. Now, we do fast forward. It didn't fix it forever. Okay, so this patient later on is still having some hygiene issues. Now, is it as bad as week 3? No, not as bad as week 3, but it's still there. It's still something that needs to be addressed. And so Marin is continually reaching out, copying the photos, showing where these areas are, and encouraging the patient. I know it's hard with the braces, but I can see improvements. Keep up the good work. It will get easier. All right. And, it's hit and miss, but it's constantly something that's not forgotten about. There's a little tutorial on brushing with braces, constantly providing resources, constantly providing support. All right. This one's a little bit better, only a couple areas here. All right. So did it fix the oral hygiene? No, didn't fix it completely. But can you imagine how much worse this would have been had nobody been saying anything about it? I went back through this patient's journey, and these are all the messages that were captured and examples that were given over the course of this, 1 year into treatment so far. All right. And of course, the rubber band wear wasn't great either. So we ended up doing a forceps there. So these patients can be challenging. I mean, obviously we wish everybody would just do what they needed to do, but they need encouragement. So this is 12 months progress. And I told you, I'm an open book. Like, is this perfect? No. There are some, like, had they not had the support and encouragement that they got both in our office and through the remote monitoring platform. All right, these are other examples, other patients. This is going to be happening all the time. And again, if you choose not to use Grin's team members to do that, use your own, like, train this, make sure that this is happening in your practice, because it's such a missed opportunity if you're just checking the scan and not taking the time to build the relationship and to really help the patient, to help them be successful with their treatment. So better hygiene was a big thing. Increased efficiency, less appointments. We talked in the beginning about the vision and how that worked. But basically, there is the ability to custom treat your patients when it comes to how long they wear the aligners. So in my office, we start out with a 2-week wear schedule. But as we all know, some patients wear the aligners better than others, and some respond better than others. And so if we see a patient is responding well, then Marin has the green light to go ahead and give them a shorter schedule. So maybe they'll change it every 12 days or 10 days, or maybe even 7 days. And then that's communicated back to our office so we can adjust appointments accordingly, which does take some logistical forethought and intention. But once you have that in place, you can allow patients to go through their treatment at their speed. And with that invention of the Start New Patient Day, we now have openings that can be used for on-demand appointments where patients are progressing more quickly. And so this was something that is an example of how that might work. So this was a patient that came in, an aligner patient. And you can see here, there's nothing magical about the setup. All right. In our office, we do a quick 3 protocol. And then after that quick 3, we add attachments. There's a lot of reasons we do that. I won't go into them today. And then we go ahead and move the teeth. And you can see in our initial setup here, it was 20 aligners. And so that was what was given to the patient. And, unless there's any IPR or anything else that needs to change in between stage 4 and stage 20, we're going to schedule the patient to be seen at stage 19 in the office, because at that point we need to do something else. So this was the setup. All right. Now, Marin's taking over. She's looking at the scans. She's encouraging them about their chewies, about their aligner fitting, about their wear time, about their mother-in-law that's a pain in the neck, whatever it is. She's taking care of it. Okay. She's pointing these things out, helping them be successful on their aligner journey. So my workflow shifts at this point. Traditionally, you guys know aligner workflow, you have a scan, you complete an RX, the team uploads it, the company sets it up, they send it back to you, you make changes, you send it back to the company, you finally approve it, they ship the aligners, they deliver them. And when you get to this point here, you would do a refinement scan. And I used to do the same exact thing. And what would happen is I would get kind of stuck in this loop down here, take a refinement scan, have to complete a new RX, then the company sets it up again, then I get it back, and then I have to review it. And over and over and over again, it was sucking my time because I had to work up all these cases. And every step of the way, my time was needed to keep the case progressing. So, and also every time you scan, you add an appointment to your treatment, and you also add length to the treatment because you're waiting on new aligners to arrive. So what we're doing now is when the patient gets through with that initial setup, the first part looks similar. Then instead of scanning for refinement, we're actually doing what's called a chairside refinement. So essentially, we are keeping the movements going, and we are actually making adjustments real time to the plan. And then we are having ULab mail the aligners directly to the patients, and they essentially just keep going without any pause in their treatment. And you can do these chairside refinements as much as you want until you're done. And the only time it requires as a doctor is the same time it would require to sit down and fill out a refinement sheet, except you're sitting down and actually adjusting the treatment plan real time. And so what that looks like is a lot of doctor time savings, and also the ability to continue on with treatment and have less appointments needed and less overall treatment time. So this is what her teeth look like at aligner number 20. And although I don't know all the details of this, but currently in beta is a system where we can actually get STL scans from these images and create a new STL file as if you had scanned the patient. But I haven't used that yet. I'm excited about that. I think that's great technology. Maybe the Grin people can tell us more about it later. But what I would do is I would see the patient back and look at what movements hadn't played out all the way. And then would add to the treatment plan real time. You can see those teeth are coming in. These are chairside refinements. So these adjustments were done chairside. We ordered the aligners chairside. They arrive at the patient's house a couple weeks later by the time they're done with number 20, and they're ready to start wearing 21. And this was her treatment completed in 9 months total treatment time. This is a workflow that I would never have been able to do, not only without the chairside refinement protocol, but also without being able to make sure that as that patient was progressing through those 20 aligners, there were no problems. So what that looks like, you deliver the quick 3, you deliver the attachments, and you start chairside refining. And then once all the hard movements are done, you deliver the debond aligners, which, by the way, also can be active as well. So I know that may be a new concept for some of you. If so, there's a lot more details about it in both of these places. So I'll give you a minute here. There's chairside refinement webinars through ULab. It's free, it's online. You can go on and watch it whenever. It goes through all the details of how to do that workflow. And then also I have a YouTube channel where I post cases, and I have a playlist on that channel, which is the chairside refinement specific. There's also some DIBS workflow tips. And then we talk a lot about earlier treatment, if that is a rabbit hole you want to go down and learn and understand, why getting the jaws ideal is so important, And again, I'm not like an airway, crazy person by any means. Like, I feel like I'm pretty reasonable about it. I don't promise people I'm curing sleep apnea, but there's a lot there that if you haven't looked into that, I think it's important. So why I chose Grin: increased efficiency, less appointments, and at the bottom line, peace of mind. I wanted to make sure that my patients were being taken care of and that weren't being missed. You can see here, all of these tracking issues, they're going to be taken care of by Marin. These are just other examples, message after message after message after message that's going on all the time without you having to do anything. I debated about whether or not to share this when I was putting this webinar together. And I can say I'm an open book, so it is what it is. This was posted just 2 days ago. And basically, there's an entire company that was created in order to help practices do everything that I just explained to you to do. Like all of the remote monitoring care, even with DM, they're promoting this company to say, hey, look, I know, like, let us do this part of it. Like, this part is hard to do well, so let us do it. And I just thought that was so telling. It's like, it took me a long time to realize how important that was. But the fact that a company can start up, and a third-party company can start up and take over monitoring for existing remote monitoring clients and be this successful really just confirmed what I already believed is at the end of the day, the relationship really is the most important thing. When I posted this on my personal Facebook that I'd be giving a webinar soon, one of my patients hopped on there and he's like, yeah, I'm living proof. Thanks, Dr. J. I was like, hey, you're like the poster child. Maybe I'll FaceTime you during the webinar and have you jump in. He's like, sure, let's do it. But this patient, I mean, we're good friends. I see him, every week as a friend essentially. He has had a challenge with his aligner treatment. His case was very, very difficult, a lot of difficult movements, which required a high level of compliance. And Maren, I don't know if you're still on, but I gave Maren a heads up that I'd be talking about him because we've just had so many conversations about working him through his journey. And Maren gets nervous when she talks to people, but I told her like, hey, look, not probably any more nervous than me, and you'll do great. But I saw this relationship transform in front of my eyes, because every week I would see this guy and he's like, he's updating me, he's telling me about his progress, and he's telling me about his conversations with Maren. But Maren, what was your experience, working with this patient and kind of helping him through his journey?
Well, thanks, Dr. J. I was actually really a little bit nervous because I thought he might jump through the screen and strangle me if I told him to stay in his aligners a little bit longer, use his chewies more. But I wanted him to know that I truly, not only do I care about his teeth, but I care about him as a person. And that's what anybody wants, right? And people just want to know that there are others that care about them. And so once we finally got through that and he knew that I was his cheerleader, you can do this, it's going to get better, it's going to be worth it, you're going to love this. He finally caved and started doing what he needed to. And now he's sending me messages about his vacations. And we're like, have a great weekend. It's great to talk to you. And he loved Debbie too. And she was monitoring. So it's just been all around an amazing experience to get to know these people and have these relationships, with people that you've never met. So it's been an incredible journey. And I'm so happy for him.
And he's progressing. He's progressing finally. It was a long journey, and just thank you for everything that you've done for not only him, but times that by every aligner patient in our practice. I mean, there's always certain things that people struggle with orthodontic treatment. There are going to be things, and to have those things taken care of by somebody who cares so deeply about what they do, but really cares so deeply for people in general is in my opinion, the most powerful thing we can offer our patients. So 1 year later, what have I learned? This is our team structure, basically. So we have me as a doctor, we have an in-office team member, and we have the Grin coordinator. So these are the people who are involved with Grin in some way. And so the Grin coordinator, I would suggest you invest time educating your Grin coordinator on your systems. So anything that's kind of specific to your practice that you do a certain way, they want to learn. So list it out, take the time, sit down, actually think these things out. What is it about your practice that's important to you? What is it about treatment? When do you like them to progress or not to progress? What do you want them to do? List it all out so it's clear so that they can meet your expectations as far as what you want. Give them access to the treatment plan, whether that's a summary statement, give them some idea of what's going on with the case. In our practice, what we just copy and paste the treatment plan from the chart into Grin, so that if Maren has a question oh, what's going on with this case, she can just jump back into the treatment plan and she knows what's going on. So to that point, if there's any weird words or acronyms that she might not know, then make sure that she knows them, so she can understand the information that you're giving her. And then she's also going to make sure, who goes where. She's going to be coordinating what patients are assigned to what people, and she'll keep track of who needs to be where. And if there's ever something that's needed, then she'll be able to assign them to that person. And then just let them do their thing. Like I say, for the first 6 months, I just was a fly on the wall and I watched. And one of the things I think that helped us to be successful in the practice implementing this is that we never talked about it. We always talked about it in a way that was from the patient's viewpoint. So, I would say things and the team would say things like, hey, we used to have you come in and miss school or work, multiple times every 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So now you're able to actually send us the information we need to progress along your treatment via this platform. And so from the very beginning, it's explained in a way that it's this is not for us, this is for you. And if you go through remote monitoring, and those of you who have done it realize that that is 100% the case. Out of all the value that it brings to us as practitioners and to our practice and to our time, the real value in this is to the patients. They get through with their treatment better and they get through with their treatment faster, and they get through with their treatment happier because emotionally they're taken care of. So my in-office team member, this team member is going to focus on the scheduling efficiencies. So they're going to be dialed in on making sure that, if we're speeding up treatment, that's, that moving of the appointment is there. If they're not ready for their next appointment, that's being pushed back. This team member is going to make sure you're not seeing patients in the office unnecessarily, okay? And this is important, right? Because, your remote monitor is not going to have access to your schedule to move things. So you have to have somebody that actually does that if you want to be able to do that. So they're going to work closely with the Grin coordinator to make that happen. So pretty much any need that occurs that is actually a need in the office. So if we need to give them elastics or whatever needs to happen, like this person is going to be the one in our office who's monitoring all that, that's working directly with Marin, and she's going to make sure that all those needs are met. And then there's me. And, I'm going to spend my time investing it in training, both my team member and Marin. Again, like I mentioned, to make sure that that's seamless. We're going to establish communication preferences. Like I said, they're willing to meet you wherever you are. So whatever type of communication preferences you prefer to get the information, to make sure that you can, not let it fall under the, fall up by the wayside, and that you stay on top of it. Part of Marin's job is managing my patients, and I'm sorry to say that part of it is managing me, and which I feel bad about because she's so great, and I always feel bad if like she messages me and I forget to message back or something. So I really appreciate her graciousness in dealing with my inability sometimes. But at the end of the day, you have a big list in an orthodontic practice, so keep your Grin list small. And what I mean by that is there may be certain patients that you want to see every single scan every single time. In my case, that's MARPI. It's some TAD patients. It's some, high, otherwise highly complicated cases. And so those are cases that I will time block every week. And I say, hey, I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes and I'm going to review all those things. But as soon as I can get them to a point where Marin can manage the majority of the scans, then that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to keep my list small. So as soon as I'm done with that monitoring process, I'm going to go ahead and assign them over to Marin to take care of everything else. And she's going to help make sure that it's done. So I hope that at least creates some sort of a clear picture of my journey with Grin and remote monitoring in general. Of all the things I've implemented into my practice, if I had to make one go away, it wouldn't be this. Like, it definitely wouldn't be this one. And if Grin went out of business tomorrow, you can bet that I would be signing up for some other remote monitoring platform, because again, it's something that once you do, you're just going to wonder why you didn't do it sooner. So, it's up to you. You can you live like I was living. I enjoyed my VHS tapes for a long, long time. But looking at things today, there's no way that I would go back to the way that we were practicing before. So that is it. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And so now, if our mute works correctly, we should be able to field some questions.
Wonderful. Dr. Manuele, thank you so much for delivering this afternoon's session. We appreciate your insights shared. And we're going to open up the chat now for a live Q&A for the last 5 minutes. So please feel free to come off mute, share them on the chat, and we will get all your burning questions answered. I did receive a couple over social media and over email. So I have some that we got through our Instagram chat box last night, but I want to make sure we cover the ones from the group first. Okay. I've got a few here. The first one is, well, we already went over the intervals. As you push patients further out with braces, are the elastic ties weakening an issue for you?
Yeah. So I will be the first to admit that I have not implemented Grin with my braces patients as ideally as I could. And so that's something that I'm still currently working on. So, basically, I would like to use more things like open coil springs and more long-lasting mechanics, closing springs, things like that. But honestly, I haven't changed a lot of my appointments with braces. And so the majority of those efficiencies that you've seen in my practice have come from redoing the aligner patients. So, the elastic chain, yes, I mean, I think that does fatigue. I don't think there's any magic in that, somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. That's probably not doing a lot. But where I will say, we talked about the hygiene aspect of it, but we didn't talk about all of the other little things that come up with braces that sometimes would delay you if they weren't caught early enough, namely whatever it is, the broken brackets, the lack of elastic compliance. So we will use them for things like, motion appliances, so we can help to monitor the progress of the case. And so there's cases that we'll submit, and again, anything that you want, your Grin coordinator to pay attention to, you just put that in the notes in the chart. So say, hey, this is a motion patient. Let us know when they're class 1, or let us know when they're a millimeter from class 1, or a millimeter past class 1, or whatever you want to know, and they'll let you know when that happens, and you can get the patient in at that time. So could I spread out my braces of patients and worked out all of the systems as far as the different mechanics I might need to use in order to make that a reality? So yes, I think that there's potential there, but like I say, I'm not doing that as good as probably other people are at this point.
Okay, great. And Kevin Dory, thank you for answering Dr. Kevin Knowlton's question on the chat there. Dr. Knowlton was asking about the Grin Remote Care Specialists contacting to keep patients on their scan cadence. So Kevin got that question answered. Thank you. Let's see. There's a question here on the patient experience. So how are your
That's a pretty
patients?
good point too, though. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay. Yeah, with the scan schedule, it's kind of cool because anybody can change it. So Marin can hop in and change it, or I can hop in and change it, or my team member can hop in and change it. So if for any reason it needs to be changed to a week or 2 weeks, or maybe you look at something like, hey, I want to keep a closer eye on that, you just change it, and Marin knows, and so then that's like what's going on. If it's something that if there's a specific reason you changed it that she needs to know, then you just send a message in there. You can assign it to her, and just when you do that, you'll have a message, and then she knows what's going on. So that process of changing scan frequencies is super easy. It's like one click.
Perfect. Are there any tips that you can provide around introducing patients to remote monitoring with Grin? Is there anything that you do in the practice?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was really worried about. Like, I didn't know how patients would perceive this. And I was worried that there would be a lot of patients who didn't want to do it. Like, that was my fear. And there are some patients who don't. So I think I've had, one patient over the last year, older gentleman, who's like, I don't have a smartphone. So, we didn't remote monitor him. And then there's been a handful that just either didn't onboard at all, like we showed them how to do it and they just never took their first scan, and or a handful that don't take scans. So I would say, out of all the patients we're monitoring, we probably have about 10 over the last year that didn't ever scan at all. Like we gave them everything and they just didn't do it. And then we probably have about another 10 or so that scan pretty irregularly. Like, we're always on them to take their scans. And so one of the nice things that we recently learned about is that you can actually set up messages to go off automatically depending on the level or how long it's been since they have not scanned. So for instance, you can set this up with Marin. So like I said, we have 3 people on this. So we have Marin, we have myself, and we have Mona. So we can set it up to where, day 1, Marin sends a message, and it can be a pre-generated message with their name. And then day 3, she sends another one. And then day 5, Mona sends one. And then day 7, one goes out from me. And so you can actually set up this kind of all system, but if you have the correct language, and you can use different messages, so that the patient is getting reminded, like, hey, we really need your scan. So before we had this system, and we're still in the process of setting it up, I just had a pre-generated message where if they were like a couple weeks overdue, Marin would just say, hey, do you mind sending them a quick message? And I would hop on there and select my pre-generated message and just manually send it. But now that can actually be done in an automated way. So we're in the process right now of setting that up and setting up all those intervals for when those messages will go out.
Great. We love that you are loving the new practice automations, our new automation tool, which is, if you're a Grin provider and you're on the line, if you're not using it, definitely have to start taking advantage of that. It's an incredible tool that we recently launched. Okay, we're at 2:01. I want to make sure a lot of these questions that I did receive, you've pretty much addressed in the content on the webinar. Can you talk a little bit about, before we hang up, this one came in a couple of times. are your overall treatment lengths shortening due to better compliance? So can you tell us a little bit about your overall treatment times?
Yeah. So 100% my aligner cases are, yeah, like without a doubt. So that was like the most clear one. And that makes sense just from the math, right? I mean, if you used to just do pretty much a 2-week wear schedule for everybody, and then you're able to tailor that to the patient, that's gonna reduce the amount of treatment time in general. But also, I think something that's really understated, and I really actually didn't even go into this much as far as the implication it has to your practice, is the level of tracking that you have. So if I'm seeing my aligner patients every 8 to 12 weeks or whatever it was before, that's 8 to 12 weeks of potential non-tracking issues that are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're backtracking on that case. So not only does reducing the wear frequency of the aligners reduce the number of, or reduce the overall treatment because it's less days in aligners, but you're also reducing on average your treatment times because these cases are tracking better. And or you're realizing in any cases that maybe it's a non-compliance issues, you're catching those really, really early because every 2 weeks or whatever it is, they're scanning. And so if there's like an issue that comes up, you're going to know about it like right in the beginning. Maybe that's a better time to have a conversation if they need to switch to some other form of treatment that might fit better in their lifestyle. So from that standpoint, yes, it's shorter because you can customize the aligner wear time, but it's also shorter because you don't have as many tracking issues that get big before you can actually address and resolve them. They're addressed real time throughout the monitoring.
Awesome. Full clinical control. Okay. Is there any final burning questions from the attendees before we wrap today's session? Okay.